Hello. This is a quick video to go over the basics of what a route is. Today we are going to go over some of the more frequently asked questions that we get here at Routes for Sale. And one of the more basic questions we get is, what is a route?
The best example would be when you go into the grocery store and see all the different bread on the shelf. For example, Thomas English Muffins, Arnold, Pepperidge Farm, or Flowers Foods. There are numerous brands, and most of them are delivered by independent distributors that have equity routes. Other common brands you see at the grocery stores, Mission Tortillas, and Snyder's Pretzels and Chips, are also delivered by independent distributors. It's important to note, not all food-related brands are equity routes or independent distributors. Some are company-owned, but the routes that we represent here at Routes for Sale are equity routes. In addition, we also sell FedEx, vending and pool routes. There are various types, but for the most part and in the simplest terms, that is what a route is.
Can you explain the benefits of owning a route when compared to other businesses?
That's a great question, especially at a time when we are facing record levels of inflation. We here at Routes for Sale have always maintained that if you are in the route business, you are in a recession-proof industry. The reason for this is simple: people must eat. And as food prices rise, then by default, so does your income because you earn commission based off your sales. In theory, the more expensive food becomes, the more your revenue increases. The other thing that is great about the route industry is that you are self-employed, and with that comes more flexibility than with a job. And additionally, there are a lot of deductions for self-employed 1099 distributors can take to offset their tax liability. Overall, when you are in this type of industry, you tend to keep up with the times. As food prices rise, so does your income.
What is the typical schedule for a distributor? What hours do they service their accounts?
It is a little bit different for each industry. For example, if you owned a snack route, then that would require you to work early morning hours. This means that a grocery store's back door will open for delivery around 5 a.m. and close around noon. With this in mind, you'll want to have all your deliveries done within that time frame. Now with bread routes, you are going to have to load your truck early in the morning before you deliver to the stores. This means that you are going to go to the warehouse, receive your bread, and break it out by each individual store. This takes a couple of hours. Realistically, you are looking at starting around 3 o'clock in the morning. Starting that early means you are able to finish up earlier. If you had a Snyder's Lance route, or a Mission or Pepperidge Farm snack route, you still have the same backdoor receiving times, 5 a.m. until roughly noon. But you load afterwards, so you do not have to start your day at 3 a.m. Instead, you can start your first stop at around 5 a.m. and then when finished, you would go to the warehouse to load if you need any additional product.
How are FedEx, pool, and vending routes different?
FedEx routes are usually operated during normal business hours, instead of early morning hours. Most FedEx routes are purchased by investors who hire employees to service the routes. Now on the other hand, bread and snack routes are more of an independent owner-operator situation. If you own a pool or vending route, then you are not operating through a third party. So you are essentially setting your own schedule, marketing and growing the business yourself.
Are Pepperidge Farm routes the best to own?
What you should know about Pepperidge Farm routes is that there are two different types of routes. One is a bread route, which would apply to the early morning hours that I previously discussed. The other is a snack route, which distribute popular products like goldfish crackers and the Milano cookies. Those are far more expensive, and they are going to be run like a snack route. You are going to start a little bit later, around 5 a.m., and you will most likely finish around noon. Now, getting into evaluations, there is a considerable price difference between the two routes. That affects the lending. For example, Pepperidge Farm acknowledges about twice as much lending on the cookie and snack routes versus the bread routes.
How are the valuations determined for routes?
Valuations will vary for each type of route, and they are based on a multiple using a trending 52-week sales average. That multiple will vary depending on the type of route and industry. We have agents that are proficient and specialize in sales with each company, so that we can give you a more accurate evaluation. With that in mind, the valuations are going to vary based on sales. how much financing is offered, and what region of the country you are in. For example, if you are in a rural area of Georgia versus Atlanta, there is going to be a different selling price. California, for instance, is going to sell for more than Colorado, and Florida is going to sell for more than Idaho. If you are considering selling or purchasing a route, contact us and we will put together a free evaluation for you.
Can I hire an employee to service the route?
This is a very common question we get. With exception to FedEx, most routes are set up to be serviced as an individual owner-operator. This ensures that the route is operated according to the service requirements, and that you can maximize your sales and minimize your expenses. That said, it may be possible to hire a helper or employee once you have gone through the training and own the route. With that in mind, hiring employees for individual routes wasn't very common in the past. Routes were originally developed under an individual owner-operator model. Companies would frown on the fact that you had employees. Since then, things have evolved, and some companies have allowed for multiple ownership. I will preference that you should own a route first. Run it for at least 6 months to a year. Have a good understanding and a good foundation of the industry before you start hiring employees. Buyers should be aware that you will still need to be available to run the route should your employee get sick or take a vacation.
Does FedEx allow for an absentee owner role?
The simple answer is yes. The FedEx business model is a little more flexible when compared to bread and snack routes. FedEx tends to be more attractive for investors who want a semi-passive income opportunity. This is because you can hire employees and managers. I say semi-passive because I do not believe any business is entirely 100% passive. From my experience, when you are not involved in the business in some capacity, it doesn't work well. As far as entry price, these are going to start around $500,000 and go up to as high as $3 or $4 million, depending on the size of the routes. One other important aspect is that FedEx routes qualify for SBA lending, assuming the seller has adequate tax returns. If you are considering purchasing a FedEx route and need financing, contact us and we can introduce you to our SBA lenders that require only 10% down.
How close must I live to the warehouse or terminal?
If you are purchasing a bread or snack route, then it is recommended that you find something closer to home so that you can service your accounts more frequently. It is advised that the route be no more than 45 minutes to an hour away. However, as we previously mentioned, FedEx owners have the ability to be semi-passive and have been known to operate across multiple states. This is not something we recommend until you get more comfortable with the business.
Do routes qualify for SBA lending?
Yes, some of the routes do. FedEx routes will qualify for SBA lending, assuming the seller has adequate tax returns. However, from our experience, most bread and snack routes do not qualify because of the way the third-party contracts are written. This is why about half of the bread and snack companies offer financing. If you have spoken to an SBA lender who says they can write these types of loans without seeing the third-party contract first, then you should be skeptical. Many have trusted their SBA lender, who didn't understand the route industry, only to find out 2 to 3 months into the transaction that the business doesn't qualify. In addition, it is important to know that the majority of the SBA qualifying process will be determined based on the seller's business and tax returns. This makes for a long qualifying process. Most SBA lenders will tell you that the process will be done in 2 months. However, they may have only the initial pre-qualification done in 2 months, but by the time it goes to underwriting, it's usually in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 months. Rarely do we see this get done faster than 4 months. As stated earlier, it is important that a buyer remember to not be overconfident. Because their lender told them that they would be approved for an SBA loan. Rest assured, Routes for Sale pre-qualifies all our routes before advertising them. If it doesn't state that it qualifies for SBA lending on our website, then it is not available for that particular business for one reason or another.
What is the typical timeline to buy a route?
It really depends on the company. The quickest ones that we see close that have a third-party approval requirement involved are mission routes. They take about 30 to 60 days. Bimbo usually gets it done in 60 to 90 days, and Flowers routes around 120 days because they require around 2 months of qualifying and 6 to 8 weeks of training. With FedEx routes, you are looking at a 4 to 6 month closing process. The quickest closing are pool or vending routes because they have no third-party approval requirement, so parties can usually look to close at any time within 2 to 3 weeks.
What are the steps involved in purchasing a route?
The first step is to sign a non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement. This is done to protect the seller from having anyone learn about the proposed acquisition prematurely. The second step involves pre-qualifying potential buyers. Please understand that we are contractually obligated with the seller to verify that the prospective buyer has the ability to purchase with cash and/or is pre-approved through a financial institution before handing out the seller's contact information. The third step is a face-to-face meeting. The buyer should arrange a face-to-face meeting with the seller to explore the route territory, learn operating procedures, and gain additional insight. The fourth step is to make an offer. Making an offer can be done at any time during the above process, and should also be noted that it is not the final step. In fact, it should be viewed as the first of several steps, each of which bring the buyer and seller closer to completing the transaction. The fifth step is a purchase agreement. This is done between the buyer and seller once there is a meeting of the minds on a selling price. The sixth step is a good faith or earnest money deposit. This requires 9% of the selling price or $8,900, whichever is greater, placed in an escrow account. Once received, the seller will set up an interview with the company for the buyer to qualify for purchase approval of the business. The seventh and final step is the closing. This typically takes 2 to 6 months after the deposit and qualifying interviews. If approved, a final meeting time will be established for closing, where the buyer will sign the distributorship agreement and exchange money with the seller in the form of a certified cashier's check. After a successful closing, the deposit will be released from the escrow as final payment.
That concludes the video. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you now understand what a route is and have a better idea of what the process is to own one. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. You can give us a call at 1-844-768-8374. Text us at 727-755-6246 or email us at info@routesforsale.net. You can also follow us on our social media